Hey everybody, it's Miss Mazzola. I'm here to do a math lesson today with you about angles. But first we're going to start with a math joke. So here's your math joke. Why was 6 afraid of 7? Because 7 ate 9. It's so funny. Okay, so for this lesson, you might want to grab your math journals to write down these terms because there are going to be a lot of names of different angles and things today that you might want to have a record of in your math notebooks. So I'll give you a second, or you can pause the video to go grab those. And if you choose not to, that's fine. You can always come back into the video to review these terms. So we're going to be talking about angles today. And angles are those measurements that you see when something is tilted. So that might be something when you're trying to figure out how much incline you're hiking going up a mountain. So the base of the mountain would be here, and your mountain could be really short or really tall. And that incline, or that angle that it's making, is the incline that you're having to hike. And the bigger that angle, the harder it is for you to be able to hike. Or the smaller it is, the easier it'll be. And you can use angles for things in building and all kinds of things like that. You have to measure and know what angles are and how big they are and what those measurements mean. So before we can talk about the types of angles, there's one term that we need to know what it means first. And that word is a ray. Okay? And a ray is a line coming out from a point. And what that means is that if we have a point, and I'm going to show you an example, and you might want to draw this in your math notebooks too. If we have a point, a ray is that line that's coming out from it. It can go in any direction. It can be as long or as short as you need it to be, okay? These lines right here are the rays, okay? So those are the lines coming out, and those rays are what we use to make our angles. We'll have a bottom ray. That's what this is when you make an angle. You'll have that bottom ray, and then the other ray coming up from it or out, going around. That ray is what helps you to know what the measurement of your angle is. So now that we know that term, we can start to talk about the different kinds of angles. All right, so the first type of angle that we're going to talk about may be a review one for you. This one is a right angle. Okay, a right angle is an angle that measures exactly 90 degrees. And I'm going to show you with my protractor down here what that means. So if you look on your protractor, there's all these numbers that are going around the top of your protractor. And those numbers help you to measure when you use your protractor what the size of your angle is. So a 90-degree angle is one that is going to line up right here in the middle with that 90 that you see. So for that one, it would look, if we had a right angle behind it, it would look like this. And you've probably seen these before. And the way we mark those to know for sure that it's a right angle, because sometimes we don't draw them perfectly, and even printers and things like that can't be exact sometimes. To mark that it's a 90-degree angle, we put a symbol like this in the corner of our angle. Okay, we put a little square in the corner there. And we need to add our point there in the corner, okay? Now we're gonna move on to another kind of angle. We're gonna do the review ones first, and then I'm going to teach you two new ones that might be new to you. All right, the next type of angle is an obtuse angle. Okay, an obtuse angle is an angle that measures greater than 90, oops, that measures greater than 90 degrees, but less than 180 degrees. Okay, so here's what that means. If we look again at our protractor, we've got all these numbers going on the outside. So we know that at 90 degrees, that's a right angle. And this is telling us that it has to be greater than 90 degrees or bigger than 90 degrees and less than 180. So if we look on either side of our protractor here, we see that 180 number. So it all depends on which way your angle is facing. You could have a right angle facing this way. And if you did that, your right angle facing this way, greater would be going this direction. So we would draw something like that, okay? An angle like that. If our right angle faced this way, we would need to open it up this way to make it bigger than 90 degrees. So it might look something like that, okay? So let's go ahead and draw our example for obtuse angle. And it could look something like this. Put our point and our ray, and obtuse is going to be hanging out further than 90 degrees. So instead of being here, it's going to open up wider. Think about a big mouth. They tell you to say ah when you go to the doctor and open up wide. So that's we kind of think of obtuse. You open up as wide as you can. Okay, and we mark the inside of angles that aren't right angles with a little bit of a different symbol. It's still in the middle inside here, but we make it a curve. And that tells people that we're going to have to measure that and find out what the measurement of it is. It's not perfectly 90 degrees. All right, our next term, our next angle is an acute angle. And I love to say this with a little accent. It's acute angle because it helps me remember what it means. It's an angle that measures less than 90 degrees, but greater than 0 degrees. Okay, so thinking about our protractor again, here's 90 degrees. And if we want it to be less than 90, that means it's going to be smaller. Okay, so we're going to take from that 90 degrees and we want to make it smaller. We want to crunch it. That's why we call it cute. It's little, it's cute. So if our right angle faced this direction, we wanted to make it smaller, we'd have to bring it this way. So our angle might look more like that. If our right angle faced that way and we want to scrunch it up smaller, our right angle, or our obtuse, or acute, excuse me, might look like that. Okay, it might be scrunched or a little bit smaller like that. So let's go ahead and draw an example of our acute angle. Okay, so we need our point. Let's go ahead and face this one the other direction this time. Actually, I'm gonna move that over just a bit. Okay, so let's put our point over here. We're gonna draw our bottom ray, and then we want it to be less than 90 degrees. So if 90 degrees is straight up from that point, we need to make it somewhere less than that, closer to laying almost flat. So I'm gonna draw it like that for my acute angle. And just like with obtuse, we mark that middle with a little circle like that, okay? All right, so we've got the review ones. Those may have been new to you, depends on for some of you, but right angles, acute angles, and obtuse angles are probably some that you've heard of before, but we're gonna go over 2 new ones today. And these are what you'll need for your assignment. So the next one is called, a zero angle. Okay, and this one is a lot like what the name says. It's an angle that measures exactly 0 or 0 degrees. Okay, so if we think about our protractor, our zeros are over here on the bottom. What that means when it's 0, it's nothing, it's laying flat. So when we draw our 0 angle, it looks like this. We would have our point, we'd have our bottom ray, and your arrows are very important so you know which way that your rays are going. And when you have a 0 angle, that means that it's right on top. It hasn't changed at all. It hasn't gone anywhere. It hasn't gone up. It hasn't gone past 90 degrees. It's still at 0. So the way we show that is we just add another arrow on that line. That's a little wonky. Let me try that again, make it a little more clear for you. So we have our point and our ray, and then we just add another arrow, and it looks like that. Okay, and these would probably be colored in to make it a little bit easier to see. Okay, and if you look at it, they're laying right flat on top of each other. That means that they are 0, okay? So the next thing that we have, the next type that we would have is a straight angle. Okay, and you might be able to guess, just like with 0, this is an angle, if we lay it out straight, that measures exactly 180 degrees. Because when we have a full protractor, a full open angle, we get 180 degrees. So just like with our 0, that 180 is over here on the corners, they're at the bottom. But to get to 180, we have to do that full open. We can't do it like 0 where it sits on top of each other. We have to start from 0, just like a speedometer in your car, from 0 to 180, 0 to 85, that kind of thing, like your speedometer. So to do that, we would draw it something like this. So we would have our ray starting from a point. We would draw our base ray, and coming straight from that point, 180 degrees, is straight out the other side. And mine's not perfectly straight, but you get the idea. It goes straight across. And to mark that, to show that it's that full line, that full measurement of an angle, just like with acute and obtuse, we have to put a curved line like that all the way arcing across it. Okay, so those are your types of angles. So you have right angles that look like this. You have obtuse angles that are going to take that 90 degrees and make it any kind of bigger before it hits straight. You've got acute angles that go from that 90 degrees and get smaller and smaller, but don't hit 0. You can have 1 degree. Then you have 0 angles that are laying right on top of each other. It hasn't moved. And you have straight angles that open a full 180 degrees to make a straight angle. So the only other thing that you might need, there's a couple other things that you'll need for your assignment. So let me move this protractor down here. Let me see if I can. No, that's not working. Okay. And let's take a look. There we go. Let's take a look at some other things that you might need to look at. So another thing that we get a lot of times when we have angles, we need to identify what kinds of angles we see in shapes. So I'm going to draw 2 shapes for you, and we're going to talk about what kinds of angles are inside them. So the first shape looks something like this, okay? And the other shape looks something like this. That was not very good. Let's try that again. Oops. Sorry, guys. Trying to make my shapes nice and clear for you. There we go. So if we look at these types of angles, we want to see what kinds are on the inside. So we might see marks like this. Oops, I forgot to undo my shape making thing. Let's try that again. Okay, let's do our triangle. That didn't work very well. My goodness, I hope you guys can draw these shapes better than I can. There we go. Okay, that's better. Okay, you might see marks like this on the insides of those angles to help tell us or give us clues about what they are. So if we were going to look at this triangle over here, we want to find out what kinds of angles are inside that shape. So a hint for us is in those markings. You might see this mark and remember from our notes that that's a hint about a kind of angle. And that tells us that we have a right angle. You are correct. Now we have to look at the other 2. These other 2 angles up here are both kind of the same shape. So I have to think about the types that we talked about. We had 0, we had acute, we had right, obtuse, and straight. So if we look at those are kind of those scrunched ones. So what do we think we call those? I don't hear you. Yes, you are right. Those are acute angles. And they are both acute angles. So in this shape, we have 2 acute angles and 1 right angle. And sometimes it'll ask you for how many of them there are, or it might just ask you about the types. Then if we take a look at our rhombus over here, I'm as close as I could get to the rhombus, I'm sorry. We can see that these 2 angles are kind of similar. They're looking like this. Okay, if we look at that bottom angle as an example, they're kind of scrunched like that. But if we look at the side ones, they look like they're more like this. So if we look back at our notes, we can get an idea of what those types of angles are. If I have a little one that looks like this, I can even get my voice going doing it. It's going to be a, you're right, acute angle. And those other ones, they're open wide. If I open wide, I have an obtuse angle. And if it asked me for how many I had, I've got 2 acutes and 2 obtuse angles. And if I wasn't sure what they were, I could definitely use my protractor here to measure them. And it's not very easy to see right here because it's not very clear, but I would measure them and I would stick this on there, and I can see that those lines, you can kind of sort of see it. Those lines, oh, there it goes, it clears it up, are lined up with 90 degrees right there. You can see that it's 90 degrees, okay? So it's super cool that you can use your protractor to help you figure out what those angles are. And the other thing you might be asked to do in your assignment is to draw an acute or obtuse or right angle. So you have to make sure that you know how to draw those and what those measurements are. You can use a protractor to make those exact, or you can just kind of freehand them and guess like we did in our notes. So you'd have your point that you'd start from, you would draw your base ray, and if I wanted an acute angle, I can draw it super small if I want to, or I can make it a little bit bigger, as long as it's less than 90 degrees going straight up. If I wanted an obtuse angle, I draw it like that, or I could draw it even almost straight, just as long as it's not a full straight, because it has to be between 90 and between 180, that full straight angle, okay? So in your assignment today, you're going to be going over those different things. You're going to look at the types of angles and try to pick which ones don't belong. Be careful to not get tricked with 0 and straight angles. They can be tricky, and you have to pay attention to which direction these arrows are facing. If you see a line or an angle that looks like this, you have to be careful. It's not a straight angle. They're laying on top of each other, which makes them a right 0 angle. But if they're going out from each other, away from each other, they have gone straight. They've opened up that full direction to go either direction. All right, so good luck on your assignment. Make sure you ask me if you have any questions, or feel free to watch this video again, pause it at any time that you need to, and good luck, ladies and gentlemen.